Assalamu alaikum, my dear students. I hope you people are all fine. Brian Herbert has very well said, the capacity to learn is a gift, the ability to learn is a skill, and the willingness to learn is a choice. So let's continue with our third week's lecture with this beautiful quote. Here is your timetable to keep you organized so that you are not overburdened and you manage and complete your tasks very nicely. Let's do the warm-up activity first. Ask yourself these fun-loving questions and try to answer these questions on your own and just enjoy this warm-up activity. What would you do if you are in these situations? Let's review week 1 and 2 lecture because week 3 is the continuity of the same unit, unit 1, the universe. We have already studied about nebula and galaxy. What is a nebula? What are the differences between nebula and a galaxy? We have also studied about Orion Nebula and that our galaxy is the Milky Way. We have also studied about the formation of our solar system, how from a nebula, gases, rocks which combine to form nebula, the stars and planets are formed. Obviously, we have studied that gases play their role in the formation of the star, whereas rocks and dust, they play part in the formation of the planets. And we also studied about the role of gravity in space, which holds all the objects in the space. We also studied about the movement of the stars, that the stars' movement is not obvious, but we cannot deny the fact that stars do move. Please take 10 minutes to go through the pages number 2 to 5, which we have already discussed in lecture 1 and 2. Let's see first what are our objectives of today's lecture. We'll know the effects of absence of air in space. How does the absence of air affect the movement of the heavenly bodies in space? We'll try to focus on the facts about presence of other heavenly bodies in space. Other heavenly bodies means other than the stars and the planets, the moons, the dwarf planets, asteroids, etc. Some more facts about dwarf planet Pluto. We'll also study about the movement of the planets, why do they move, how do they move, what keeps them moving, and we'll also focus and learn about some facts of the planets of the solar system. Let's now start with day 1. We are going to study unit 1, the universe, and the topic we are going to study is on page number 5 of your World Watch 1, what makes the planets orbit the sun. Our next topic is on page number 4 of your book, what makes the planets orbit the sun? What do you mean by this question? Any idea? What is meant by this question? I'll explain you. See, the planets, they keep on orbiting the sun and they do not lose their path. If we talk about the orbit, it's an imaginary path, right? It's not actually drawn where planets have to move around the sun. So that imaginary part, which is known as the orbit of the planet never leaves its orbit. It stays in its orbit around the sun. So what is there? Because of which the planets, they keep on orbiting the sun. Before we go into the deep detail, have you ever observed that if you roll the ball on the ground and there is nothing to stop it apparently, even then it stops after some time? So what can stop or slow down that ball which is moving? You people have already studied about this force in grade 5. It is known as force of friction. Force of friction is actually the force which tries to stop the movement or tries to slow down anything which is moving. Now, if the same question is considered in space, keep in mind space and the objects which are in the space, what can stop an object from moving in the air? Leave the space aside for a while. We are talking about the air. Take an example of hot air balloon. Take the example of any other thing which is moving in the air. Do you think there can be anything which can stop the movement of an object in the air? Yes, again, a force is there which tries to stop or slows down the movement of any object which is moving in the air, and that force is known as air resistance. Now, both the forces, the force of friction and air resistance, are same kind of forces, right? But the difference is that air resistance is acting in the air while the objects are in the air, and same force acts in the space as well. Now, if I explain you force of friction with the help of a diagram, over here you can see a man pushing a box towards the right hand side. Now, friction is the force which is acting in the opposite direction. If the man is trying to push the box towards right hand side, that force is exerted towards the left hand side. So actually, force of friction is a force which is exerted opposite to the movement of any object, and it tries to slow down or stop the movement of any object, right? So you can say it's an opposing force. Talking about air resistance, here is the example of parachute. Air resistance or drag force, it is towards up, it is pushing, right? Whereas gravity of the earth is pulling this object towards the earth. Now, both the forces, this is air resistance which is acting opposite to the force of gravity. So we can again say that air resistance also acts opposite to the force of gravity, and thus it acts as an opposing force, as a force which tries to stop or slow down the movement. Now, keeping in mind these two forces, force of friction and air resistance, remember that both the forces, they act opposite to the force of gravity, hence they try to slow down or try to stop the movement of any object which is in motion, which is moving. Now, one more thing, that every object has a center of gravity. This we have been revising from our first topic, that all the objects have center of gravity, whether they are in the space, because right now we are talking about the universe, so I'm talking about all the objects which are present in the space. They have their center of gravity. So that means that each and every object in the space, according to its size, is trying to pull the other object towards itself, right? Number two, objects which have large mass, they have strong gravity. If you think about the planets, Jupiter is the largest planet in terms of mass as well. So it has the strongest gravity, right, as compared to the other planets. And the third fact is, sun's gravity makes the planets stay in their orbits. Obviously, if you talk about the solar system, sun is the major body. Okay, it comprises of about 99% of the mass of the solar system, right? So sun's gravity, it tries to pull the planets towards itself, and the planets have their own gravity. They are trying to exert their force of their gravitational force as well, their gravitational pull as well. Gravitational pull would be more appropriate term over here. So all the objects, because of their gravity, are staying at their position. And if you talk about the solar system, it is because of the sun's gravity that all the planets are staying in their orbits and are not moving here and there. Now, the planets which are near the sun are under great effect of force of gravity, or great effect of gravitational pull of the sun. As you start moving away, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, the gravitational pull slowly decreases, and that is the reason there is a proper gap between each and every planet. Okay, and they are not collapsing, or they are not colliding with one another. So air resistance is very important, that you have to keep in mind, right? Now, if we talk about air, in the air we have air resistance. Let's move on and see that if there is air resistance in the space, then why don't the planets stop? Why do they keep on moving? Okay, so let's talk about that as well. Right now we have just studied that it is because of the sun's gravity that the planets are continuously orbiting the sun, and they are staying in their orbits. Why are they staying in their orbits? Because of the gravitational pull of the sun. Remember this thing. What about air resistance in space? Can planets stop moving? Have you ever heard that, oh, Earth has stopped moving? oh, Mars has stopped moving around the sun. Yes, never. This is the point to think. Why do you think? What is the reason coming in your mind that the planets never stop moving? And the other thing you need to think is space, then air resistance. Relate these three things: air resistance, space, and the planets which are constantly moving. Okay, now we will discuss why are the planets constantly moving? Can they ever stop? Let's see. You must have seen this picture. Maybe it's an astronaut who is trying to land on moon, or who is in space. What do you think about this picture? What comes in your mind about this astronaut? Why are his feet not on the ground? Any idea? Yes, because in space there is no air. So where there is no air, the object keeps on floating. Same is the case with this astronaut. This astronaut is floating in the space because in space there is no air. Now this is the first clue. As there is no air in the space, so how come air resistance is there? There can't be any air resistance over there. If there is no air, how can there be air resistance? Thus the planets, they keep on moving, and there is nothing, there is no force like air resistance or force of friction which can stop the movement of the objects or the movement of the planets in space, right? So this is important, that in the space, as there is no air, so there is no air resistance. Thus the planets keep on moving and they never stop. And what keeps them in the orbit? It is the gravitational pull or force of gravity of the sun which keeps all the planets in their orbits, right? See? This is how the planets are moving all the time, and because of the gravitational pull of the sun, different level of gravitational pull of the sun, the planets are constantly moving in their orbits and they are not colliding with one another, right? Now you have to read the topic on page number 4, what makes the planets orbit the sun. It is starting on page number 4 and continues till page number 5. Underline the points which are given on the previous slide and which are mentioned on this slide on page number 5 of the book. I have mentioned them in the next slide. You can go through and you can underline accordingly. All right. Hubble telescope. Have you ever heard this name? Hubble telescope. Okay, what is a telescope? Do you know what is a telescope? Yes, telescope. Actually, what does telescope do? An instrument which uses lenses. It has curved mirrors, or it can have a combination of both, and it is actually used to observe distant objects or various devices, right? So Hubble telescope was named after the American astronomer whose name was Edwin Hubble. Okay, his name was Edwin Hubble, who died in 1953, and this telescope was actually launched by NASA in 1990. Okay, what does this telescope do? It orbits the Earth above the atmosphere, and different views of the universe, they are very clear from that, from this, with the help of this telescope. And because of this telescope, we were able to see Orion Nebula. The picture which is mentioned in your book was taken from Hubble telescope, right? So this information is given on page number 5 of your books, where a picture of the Hubble telescope is given and a box of information is also given. Please read and underline the information and look at the picture as well. Now, whatever we have discussed related to these two topics, which was how did our solar system form and what makes the planets orbit the sun, all this information is given on these two pages. This is page number 4 and this is page number 5 of your books. This is the topic, what makes the planets orbit the sun, right? Now, first of all, you have to read this paragraph on page number 4 very carefully, because it is explaining you the concept of air resistance and gravity, how both these forces are acting opposite to one another, right? Then coming towards this page, highlight these points. This point says that there is no air in space, so there is nothing to slow down the planets, right? So there is no air resistance to slow down the planets. So this can be the answer of a relevant question. Then every object has gravity. The sun is massive. This is actually explaining you how come the planets stay in their orbits. Okay, they do not lose their orbits. Please underline these points. Then this, it's a fact, which is on page number 5. We have discussed this in the slides. Gravity's definition is given. Then larger mass has stronger force of gravity. Then gravity keeps the planets and stars in their orbits in space. Please mark this as important point as well. Now this is the picture of Hubble telescope, and the information is given related to it. Kindly underline the important things and learn them as well. Alright, now as we are done with our day 1 task, here is your homework, here is your additional task. What are you supposed to do is, obviously you will revise last week's lecture. After going through the lecture, you will read page number 4 and 5 of your books. You will revise all the highlighted points. Let's start with our lesson number 2 of this week. But if you are not done with your previous homework of day 1, if you have not read the pages, kindly complete your homework first and then continue with the topic planets in our solar system. Here we'll discuss about the difference between these heavenly bodies, planets, asteroids, and the dwarf planets. Other than this, we'll also focus upon some other facts related to the planets, asteroids, and dwarf planets. Let's first discuss about 3 kinds of heavenly bodies. The 3 kinds of heavenly bodies which comprise of the solar system are the planets, the asteroids, the moons. There are so many, but we are going to discuss about 3 kinds of heavenly bodies because we will be focusing upon the difference between those 3 heavenly bodies. Number 1, planets. Planets are the large objects that travel around or orbit the stars. If you talk about our solar system consists of 8 planets which are revolving around the sun in their respective orbits. Then all the planets have their own moons. So this is how the planets are categorized as one of the heavenly bodies. Secondly, asteroids. Here is the picture of the asteroid. You can see it is a small rocky body. Can you see? And it is also revolving around the sun. So it is a small rocky body orbiting the sun, and they are much smaller than the planets, right? The third kind of heavenly body which we are going to discuss over here are the dwarf planets. What are dwarf planets? We have studied about one of the dwarf planet. Yes, planet Pluto. We have just studied about planet Pluto. Here are some other dwarf planets as well. Eris, Charon, Ceres. We will be discussing about 1 or 2 more facts related to the discovery of Eris and Charon, right? Okay, if you talk about the dwarf planets, it is an object which is orbiting the sun and is large enough to be rounded by its own gravity, but is not gravitationally dominant in its orbital area and is not a moon. Now, when we did those revision lectures, we studied about planet Pluto. I asked you a question, has planet Pluto destroyed? So the answer was no. Planet Pluto is still there. It was reclassified as a dwarf planet because planet Pluto has some other heavenly bodies in its orbital area which are larger than the size of Pluto. 2 more heavenly bodies were discovered at that time, which were Eris. It was discovered in 2005. It was in the orbital area of the Pluto, and its size was larger than the Pluto. That was the reason that it did not fulfill the criteria to become the planet and was classified as a dwarf planet. Dwarf planets are bigger than asteroids but smaller than the smallest planet, which is Mercury. So they lie in between the asteroids and the smallest planet, Mercury. Now I would like you people to write down these points on page number 5 or page number 6 of your books, where we are studying, we'll be studying about different planets, the names of the planets. Some information about asteroids is also given over there, along with the information of dwarf planets. So please note down these points on page number 5 and page number 6 of your books. First of all, we'll study about the planets in our solar system, one of the heavenly bodies, which are the planets. Our solar system comprises of how many planets? 8 planets. Now it's very important to memorize the names of the planets of our solar system in an order. For that, here we have a mnemonic. What is a mnemonic? Mnemonic are different words, pictures, or actions which help us to remember something. So to memorize the names of the planets in an order, here is the mnemonic. My very easy maths just shows us numbers. Now my, M for Mercury, very, V for Venus, easy, E for Earth, maths, M for Mars, just, J for Jupiter, shows, S for Saturn, us, U for Uranus, numbers, N for Neptune. We call such words as mnemonic. Do you remember I told you one more mnemonic to remember the order of the 4 cardinal directions? Naughty elephant splashes water, or nobody eats sour worms. So this is how we remember the order of the planets. Now you people have already studied that all these planets, they revolve around the sun in their respective orbits, and it is possible because of the gravitational pull of the sun. We know that the largest heavenly body of our solar system is the sun. So obviously the largest the body is, the more is the gravitational pull of that particular object. So sun has the strongest gravitational pull, which keeps the planets revolving around it in their respective orbits. That is the reason they do not leave their orbits and keep on revolving around the sun in their orbit. Now underline and learn the names of the planets on page number 6 of your book. Okay, the names are written with numbering over there. You can learn the names of the planets of the solar system from there. Terrestrial and Jovian planets. Now when we did the revision lecture on the planets, I told you about the difference between the terrestrial and the Jovian planets. There are in all 8 planets of our solar system, right? And some of them are Jovian planets, some of them are terrestrial planets. Now what are terrestrial planets? The first 4 planets, if you look over here, Mercury, Venus, Earth and Mars. The first 4 planets of our solar system, they are known as the terrestrial planets, right? They are known as the terrestrial planets. Why are they known as the terrestrial planets? Because they are made up of mainly rock and metal. These 4 planets, Mercury, Venus, Earth and Mars. Now if you talk about these 4 planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus and Neptune, we call them as Jovian planets. Why do we call them as Jovian planets? Because these are the gas giants. They are made up of hydrogen, helium and water in different physical states. It can be liquid, can be gas, can be solid, ice. So the Jovian planets are the gas giants, which are made up of hydrogen, helium, water, which can be in different physical states. There are 3 states: solid, liquid and gas. So this is how we have categorized the 8 planets of our solar system into 2 categories, right? Now if we talk about some of the characteristics of these planets, talking about planet Mercury, you know it is closest planet to the sun and it has the shortest orbit. These are the orbits. This is the orbit of the planet Mercury. It has the shortest orbit. So obviously the year time will be also short. 1 year in Mercury, on planet Mercury, is of about 86 days or 88 days, I think, right? Talking about the second planet, planet Venus, it is the hottest planet. Now if you talk about the distance between the sun and these planets, Mercury has the shortest distance from the sun, but there are some points in planet Mercury. As planet Mercury has no atmosphere, it has very thin atmosphere. At night or in the areas where sun rays do not fall, the temperature quickly drops. It rises where sun rays fall, but it quickly drops. That is why planet Mercury is the planet which has the coldest surface temperature. So the distance doesn't matter over here. It is not the hottest planet. Venus is the hottest planet because it is also known as the planet of fire. Then talking about Neptune. Neptune is the farthest planet and obviously the coldest planet. It has the longest orbit. See, it has the longest orbit, and obviously 1 year would be of, so many years on Earth. Let's discuss some more facts about the different planets. Planet Mercury, we have already studied that it is the closest to the sun. It's very hot where it is daytime, but cools down where it's nighttime due to the thinnest atmosphere. That is the reason that it has the lowest surface temperature. Venus is the hottest because sun rays fall directly, and it has a lot of volcanoes as well. That is the reason it is known as the planet of fire. If you talk about planet Earth, it is the living planet. Planet Mars is the next candidate planet to hold life. Jupiter is the biggest, has strongest gravity. Saturn is known for its rings. Uranus is blue planet. It is known as blue planet. It's not because due to water, but gases which give it, blue color. Planet Neptune is the farthest, and that is why is the coldest planet of the solar system. Okay. Now, Pluto is known as the dwarf planet. Why and how? Do you know anything? Yes, actually, an object which was larger than Pluto, its name was Eris. It was discovered in 2005, and a minor planet Chiron was discovered in 2006. Now, both these heavenly bodies, Eris and Chiron, specifically Eris, it was larger than the Pluto in its size, and Chiron as well. They were discovered, which made scientists categorize Pluto as a dwarf planet. Because to become a planet, it is very important not to have any heavenly body around its orbital area which has more gravitational pull. But in this case, Eris and Chiron, they were slightly larger objects, and which this was the reason which made scientists recategorize Pluto as a dwarf planet. Now, if you talk about our solar system, it has over 200 dwarf planets. This fact is written in your book as well. Check it out and learn the number of moons which are given in It's a Fact on page number 6. Now, this number, can differ because every time there is an advancement in every field. So same is the case over here. More and more moons have been discovered and named as well, but you can go through this fact as well. Some of the facts have not changed which are over here. You can go through and you can learn the important things. Alright, here is the spot test. I want you to attempt it religiously to understand your learning, your understanding. Which planet do you think is the hottest? You have to name the planet, and then you have to think about the reason as well. Okay. Number 2 is, which planet do you think is the coldest? And what is the reason that it is the coldest planet? Then which planet has the longest orbit? Which planet has the shortest orbit? Which planet do you think have shortest and longest year? Focus upon the question. It's asking you about 2 things, right? Then you have to focus and try to answer these questions, because these questions are quite relevant, and they'll help you out to solve the worksheet. Think about the reasons as well, and if you're unable to attempt any question, you can note it down and you can ask me during the Zoom class, right? Here is the homework for your day 2, lesson number 2. Please revise last week's lecture again. After going through the lecture of day 2, read page number 5 and 6. Try to solve the spot test and assess yourself. Revise all the highlighted points in the book and try to learn them. Alright, day 3 is for your written work. After you have gone through day 1 and day 2 lecture, you should be able to answer the following questions. You are going to do these question answers in your notebook and then take its picture and please turn in the work where this presentation is posted. Name a galaxy near to us. You have to write down the name of the galaxy. Please write down the complete sentence that dash is the galaxy near to us. full stop. Who discovered it? You have to write down the name of the person who discovered that galaxy with writing down of complete sentence. Question number 2 says, name the telescope which orbits the earth and takes photographs of the parts of space we cannot see from the earth. Again, you don't have to write down the name of the telescope directly, but you have to write down the complete sentence along with the name of the telescope. Question number 3 is a little tricky. You have to try to understand the question. It says, what keeps the planets moving? Now here, try to recall the role of air resistance, whether it is present or absent. Go through that slide where I have explained you about force of friction and air resistance, and then in the next slide I have explained you what keeps the planets moving in space. Why is it so that the planets never stop moving? So over here you have to give a valid reason of the continuous movement of the planets. I hope this is clear. Then, what keeps the planets stay in their orbits around the sun? Now try to recognize the difference between question number 3 and question number 4. Question number 3 is saying what keeps the planets moving. That means, why are the planets continuously moving and they never stop? Right? They never stop moving around the sun. Whereas the 4th question says that what keeps the planets stay in their orbit around the sun. Orbit means the path on which they are revolving around the sun, they're moving around the sun, they never leave their path. Have you ever heard that Mercury has started revolving with Venus in its orbit? No, never at all. So what keeps the planets stay in their orbits around the sun? Please go through this topic. Try to study about the role of gravity, that all the heavenly bodies have their center of gravity and they try to pull the other objects towards their center. Obviously, the larger the body is, the stronger the gravity will be. Okay, so relate gravity with the size of the object, with the size of the heavenly body, and then try to write down the answer in your own words. Please do not forget to submit your work, and after you have submitted, please learn your question answers as well. I'll ask you these question answers in the Zoom class. All the questions answers are in the presentation and lecture. Still, if you find it difficult to find out the answer of any question, you are most welcome to note down your question and discuss with me in the Zoom class. Time to review and discuss whatever we have studied in this lecture. We have studied about absence of air resistance in space keeps the planets moving. We have also studied about the role of gravitational pull of the sun, which keeps the planets stay in their orbits. We have studied the difference between planets, dwarf planets and asteroids, and we have also discussed about what are Jovian and terrestrial planets and how are these two types of planets different from one another. Today's lecture, thank you very much. Please, if there are any questions, note them down, bring them along with you in the Zoom class, and study hard, stay motivated and work diligently. Allah Hafiz.